For silence it. Are we ready now? Okay, I will call to order the regular Oregon City Commission meeting for Wednesday, July 17th, 2019. We did have an executive session prior to this meeting. None of that will have to come out in public, so, well, are we going to approve that in the consent agenda? I'm sorry. The judges.
It will be on the next agenda.
Oh, so it's going to be on the next agenda. So call a roll, please.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Here.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Present.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith is absent this evening, and Mayor Dan Holliday.
Here. So please stand and join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so under ceremonies, proclamations, and presentations, we have 19-435 Metro Housing Bond and Holcomb Boulevard Properties presentation by Jill Smith. And instead of Stephen McMurray, we have Fahid Brown from Clackamas County.
Good evening, Commissioners and Mayor. Thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm Jill Smith. I am the Director of Housing and Housing Services for Clackamas County, and I'm also serving as the Executive Director of the Housing Authority of Clackamas County.
And good evening, I'm Vahid Brown, the Housing Policy Coordinator for Clackamas County.
We have accepted this invitation to talk briefly to you about opportunities for the county related to the Metro Housing Bond, as well as discuss plans for the public housing properties off of Holcomb, Clackamas Heights, and Oregon City View Manor that are in Oregon City. And we're gonna, Vahid can kick that off.
Okay, and you have a very busy agenda, so we're going to be brief and move through this relatively quickly. If you want to go to, does that work? Here we go. So I'm sure the Commission is aware that we're in a housing crisis and there is a significant need for housing and additional resources to address the needs of people in housing crisis and insecurity. I have a few slides here that present some information about the state of that problem. Just very briefly on this first slide, given the scale of need versus the available programming that we have at the county, it would take us 22 years just to move folks off of one of our wait lists, assuming that no new people were to go on that wait list.
So this number 569, is that all of Clackamas County or is that just Oregon City?
That's all of Clackamas County.
Okay.
The next slide in our public housing inventory, we have 545 units. In 2017, the wait lists for public housing were opened and 7,892 households applied. So again, that's indicative of the scale of the need. Many of our communities in the county, including Oregon City, are rent burdened. In Oregon City, 24% of people who rent are severely rent burdened, meaning they pay more than half of their income for their housing. And it's even more acute for people at the lowest end of the income spectrum. Home ownership, the next slide. Clackamas County has the highest average home sale price in the state of Oregon. We also have the highest average home assessed value in the state of Oregon. So people making area median income, 100% of area median income, are unable to afford the average home sale in the market today. So it's out of reach for many people. What we have with the Metro Affordable Housing Bond is $116 million for affordable housing development for Clackamas County. The eligible uses of that are to build new units, to purchase and rehabilitate existing units, to land bank, to buy land for the development of affordable housing, and to create opportunities for home ownership. The Metro framework includes these kind of four principles that define each jurisdiction's implementation of the bond dollars, leading with racial equity, creating opportunity for those in most need, creating opportunity throughout the region, and ensuring long-term benefits and good use of public dollars. Those are the framework principles provided by Metro. The shaded blue areas are the areas of the county that are within the Metro boundaries and where we can eligibly use the dollars to develop affordable housing.
Just curiosity, how many units are there in Lake Oswego?
How many units are there in Lake Oswego?
Yeah.
How many housing units? I don't know off the top of my head.
No, I mean, how many affordable housing or these, like Clackamas Heights?
There is not a lot of affordable housing in Lake Oswego.
Okay.
There is some. Yep. Speaking of location, the development of our housing will be within the metro boundaries, obviously. We already have some, in our local implementation strategy, some guidelines for location with respect to proximity to things like services and transportation and jobs and so forth. But each project that comes forward, each proposal that comes forward will have to kind of meet requirements set forth in the metro framework and in our local implementation strategy. Factors include the readiness of the project. Do they control the land? Is there appropriate zoning? So we'll work with jurisdictional partners and proposers of projects on location criteria. We've also done a lot of community engagement.
Which one will come first?
Which one of what?
What the jurisdictions need or people who want to build?
I don't know if I understand your question.
So your previous comment was that you're going to work with local jurisdictional partners determine their needs and their priorities. So who has priority, the local jurisdictions or the people that are building it in terms of where the needs are? I mean, for instance, so I'm
Yeah.
the city of Gladstone and I say, we need X, and then developer Y comes over here and says, oh, I want to build it over here. Whereas so how's that going to be weighed? Is Gladstone going to have more weight in what they need versus somebody who's going to build it?
No, that's a great question. I think that there's our local implementation strategy defines kind of how we would assess if someone came forward with a proposal and said, we have this. What the strategy says is these are the criteria that we're going to look at to make a determination if this proposal is going to rise to the top of the list. And that's going to be more towards on the end of what jurisdictions need and on where need is real, where the project would meet our criteria in terms of access to services and jobs and good neighborhoods and so forth. So I think that we're defining what we want up front on the basis of jurisdictional input from our first round of community engagement, on the basis of things like the housing needs assessment. And if a project proposer says, we want bond dollars in this project, and it doesn't meet those criteria, it won't rise to the level of being funded.
Well, and I want to add to that. You'll see in just a minute, we're going to show all the metro requirements, which are pretty challenging just to meet the metro requirements. So intentionally, Clackamas County's largest priority is readiness. So if a project comes to us that has the appropriate zoning, land use, and it's near services like groceries, transportation, and jobs, those will be the strongest indicators of where we would place things based upon what we've heard from folks we've talked to that are residents of the county, all over the county. And I think, are you going to speak more to that? You do have more on that, I think.
A little bit, yeah. There's this next slide is so this was defined by Metro. So these are some of the Metro requirements that Jill's referring to. The goals for Clackamas County with that $116 million is to create housing units for 2,500 county residents or people who live in the community. That's developing approximately 812 new units to meet the needs of families that are larger. 406 of the units must be 2 bedrooms or larger. At least 40% of the new developed units must be for families earning 30% or less of area median income. So 40% of the new units have to house the very poorest residents in the community, and in the range of 61 to 80% of area median income. Up to 10% of the bond dollars can be used for folks in that income range. So there's income requirements that will drive the development of a lot of the units. We can skip this one. The leading with racial equity, as I already mentioned, is one of the framework principles that Metro established for the housing bond. Some of the things that that are in our local implementation strategy related to advancing racial equity are reduction of screening criteria, marketing strategies with intensified outreach, and we've already worked with culturally specific providers to do community engagement with communities of color and communities with limited language, English language proficiency, immigrants and refugees. We also will take into account a study that was commissioned and it's being completed by the Portland State University on the history of racial inequities in housing in the county. Jill, I'll turn this one over to you.
Okay, so these are opportunities to consider, and one of them is we're hoping to use these bond funds to help provide permanent supportive housing. When you're housing folks that are at 0 to 30% of area median income, these are the folks that live in public housing. They're your neighbors, so you know how these folks are. A lot of them have a lot of high barriers coming out of homelessness. They have, not all of them, but a lot of these folks do need more than just housing. So as a county and being part of Health, Housing, and Human Services, we're committed to working together to finding the resources for services to help these folks be successful once they are housed. Prioritizing community development funds through CDBG and home for use outside of the urban growth boundary. Since we have this new funding source to be used within through this Metro bond, we are going to prioritize other funding for outside. Like I said, project readiness is very important to us. We really feel like we're in a state of emergency and we need to act now to get these units built or as quickly as possible. And we're encouraging development to solve the rent burden community issues that we're seeing in many of our cities.
We recently completed several months of community engagement to inform a draft of the local implementation strategy for Clackamas County, but that engagement is not over, and we'll continue to engage with communities with respect to individual projects and the implementation of the bond moving forward. We worked with and are working, continue to work with a nonprofit, culturally specific organization called Unite Oregon, and they helped us mobilize and do outreach to communities of color and communities with limited English proficiency, people who have disabilities. We had several remarkable meetings at community centers in Clackamas County that I saw where throughout the room there were knots of people surrounded by a translator speaking Arabic over here and Vietnamese over here and Spanish over here. So their ability to quickly engage with communities and get them mobilized to community meetings was very promising, and we look forward to working with them moving forward.
So this is our implementation timeline that we're working within right now. Right now, we are at the local implementation strategy proposals, and there's also an intergovernmental agreement. And really what those are the governing documents, the legal documents between Clackamas County Housing Authority that the funds will flow through and Metro. It's very important and that we're working what we're calling the LIS, our local implementation strategy, because it talks about what Clackamas County thinks is important. Every jurisdiction's is a little bit different depending on their need, what they heard from their community. We're also negotiating with Metro on an IGA regionally. All of the partners, whether it's Hillsborough, Beaverton, Gresham, Washington County, us, the whole group of us is negotiating to ensure that we have good terms and we're able to do this challenging work locally, meet local needs. And we're hopeful we can be through those processes, that those are adopted, and we have funding to release by late September. That is our goal, and we're on track as of right now. So I think I just kind of told you what comes next. I think this one is done.
Yep. Talk about the...
Yes, I wanted to transition into, so we have this new funding resource that we didn't have a few years ago when we were talking about next steps with Oregon City, View Manor, and Clackamas Heights and the redevelopment of those properties. And I wanted to talk about kind of where we are in that trajectory right now and answer any questions that you might have. As the new executive director of the Housing Authority, I've been involved in some pretty big public housing repositioning projects when I worked at Home Forward in Multnomah County. And these are, they're challenging. They're exciting, but they involve moving really vulnerable people out of their homes, and we need to do them thoughtfully and well. And the first step that I feel really strongly we need to take is invest in building units that they can all move into. So as we work to negotiate and find developments that we're going to use to develop with the bond all over the county that have deeply affordable units that these folks can afford to live in, there will be a requirement that there's a preference for folks who are being transitioned out of public housing. So because of that, a few years ago when we talked to HUD about our plan to transition folks out of Oregon City View Manor first, the reason HUD and others were critical of that plan is we didn't have those units in place. And this is an important first step that would make me feel, and I think everybody would feel better if we had secured affordable units for people to move into. So our first step is to build some of those units. The quicker we can do that, then the first step we would, we're anticipating by 2022, we would be ready to start working on Clackamas Heights and Oregon City View Manor. Going through with HUD what's called a Section 18 disposition. It means you're moving out of public housing, getting a voucher for everyone that lives in those units, helping them, paying for them to transition into another affordable unit that we've developed through bond proceeds. So our initial focus with Metro dollars will be on Hillside Manor, which is in Milwaukee. And that would be the majority of the units that are developed for these folks to have the option to move into. At that point, our hope is that we can use Clackamas Heights as a place that with your assistance and proper zoning and land use, we could put a smaller project of maybe 60 units there. It could also be a great option for first-time homeownership. We want to partner with you. We would love to work with you to figure out what would be best for the city there. Oregon City View Manor, I think you know, it's a challenging property. There's a lot of restrictions that would make it really hard for us to put multifamily units there. Just the elevation alone is really challenging. So same thing, it would be planned there. Same approximate timing, 2022, when we've got a number of units with a priority for these people to move into it, written into the agreement. The intention would be to dispose of the public housing, sell that property. There is an option for first-time home ownership there. Again, we'd want to work with you and make sure that, it meets your needs and what you hope. The funding that we would gain as a housing authority from those transactions would be substantial, and HUD does require you to replace every unit that you transition away from public housing for a like-size unit. Hopefully some of those are in Oregon City. And if you could also help us to identify other potential properties, that could even be an option for earlier bond funding, because it'd be wonderful if these folks could transition, somewhere in the city that they currently live in. That is the plan for right now. And I know it is a little different than what it was before. Caused a lot of confusion and fear, but again, I think this is the best route to ensure people have a place to go.
So let me ask you this, because the county doesn't have a great track record of taking care of the stuff that they have, which is part of the reason why the apartment set in up there in Park Place is, not feasible to repair anymore. When you build these units, who's going to where's the money going to come from to continually maintain them so that they don't fall apart in 5 years and we've got leaky roofs and bad siding and all the other kinds of things?
So the county actually is a high performer. We meet all of the requirements that HUD places on us for managing public housing. Public housing is something HUD is disinvesting in. They require you to maintain certain standards, but they are no longer giving us any capital money to maintain those units. In fact, every year over the last 10 years, it has dramatically decreased while the units are aging. And this is happening all over the country. HUD has told us, the local HUD office told us they want to be out of the public housing business in 5 years. So public housing is going to go away. To me, somebody that's been in this business a long time is troubling because that is the only certain housing we have for our most vulnerable, lowest income people. Otherwise, you have a voucher in your hand and you're subject to the whims of the private market. So this is a federal problem. And I feel your frustration. I am frustrated with the way those units look as well.
You didn't answer my question, because the fact is you're spending, in Clackamas County, 116 million or whatever it is to build these things, but it's sort of like us building a fire station and not having the money to staff it.
Oh,
So the question is, how are you gonna maintain these things that you build?
So these won't just be built with bond funding. There'll also be tax credit funding in there. There will most likely be some private debt in there. These will be not owned by Clackamas County. I would say a fraction of them will be owned by Clackamas County. We intend to partner with private, for-profit, and nonprofit developers that will own and manage these under the restrictions of tax credit regulations, which require them to be maintained affordable and in good condition for 60 years.
Okay, thank
So
you.
this is a whole different program.
Anybody else? Denise?
So I probably need to make an appointment with you to come in and talk about what's going on with the property in Park Place, because I don't know about the before. What I have heard and what concerns me a little bit is that although you're talking about giving people priority housing in Milwaukee, many of the people who live there, most of the people, that's their community. That's where their kids go to school, that's where they live, that's where they know. And I guess I'm not convinced, because I believe maybe Pollyannish, many things are possible. I don't understand why you can't build on that site, and again, we can talk offline and at an appointment. You already own the property. It seems to me you have a golden opportunity to do a phased move out and a phased move in, and keep people in place in the community instead of moving them someplace else and then having them scattered to the winds. Maybe, I know from some of the people, that's their support group. That's the people that they rely on, their kids play together, and to disperse these people all over the place, I think there's gonna be some problems with that, and that's not really gonna be helpful to them. So they get a brand new place. They don't know anybody, they're isolated, they're not with their community. It just seems to me that there are other options, and maybe they've already been considered, or maybe they need to go back and reconsider, because it seems to me you've got an opportunity to keep people there, build in a phased manner with a private developer building, a private nonprofit building, and you move out of here, you move into this new place, you move out of here, you tear that down, you move them over here, they're still there. They can,
Yeah.
I've seen it happen. I know it's possible.
I agree with you.
And I don't think the site is that difficult to build. There are creative people in the metro region that know how to build on sites, not just the flat ones. So it seems to me that there are many opportunities, and unless you put a billion conditions on some private developer to put in housing for first-time homeowners, I don't want this to be blown to the market, to just let it be out there.
So I agree with you, and what you just described is the plan for the Milwaukee public housing site, which is identical to these two. There's been a planning process in place there for a couple of years now, and it's ready to go. We would love to do the same thing at Clackamas Heights. The zoning and a few other things needs some work that would enable us to build a development like that at Clackamas Heights. So if we can work on that over the next few years, we're very open to that. Every family that lives there, when we go through this process, will get a voucher. They can choose to stay here or go to another unit that we've built anywhere in the county. We're anticipating proposals coming to us from all corners of the county. So people will have options. And like I said, exactly what you described is what we're planning for in Milwaukee, where you take down 10 units, shift people, rebuild something there, and people stay in place as we do that process. And again, I would love to do that at Clackamas Heights next, but we've got some work to do if we can get there. I would love to talk with you more.
Chief Ban?
I'll make an appointment.
So I have one question. So say hypothetically, there was a piece of property and county housing put a new apartment complex or whatever in Oregon City, and you have people on the list waiting for county housing, would the new complex in Oregon City be, as you went down the list, would you go to the people who lived somewhere in Oregon City and say, hey, there's available Oregon City housing? Or would you go through the list and say, hey, Happy Valley person, Milwaukee person, Gladstone, there's space in Oregon City? How does that work?
So it depends. So you're talking about like maybe a Metro Bond project that's built in Oregon City on land?
Just generally county housing.
Okay.
Do you open up spaces to people who say that they live in Oregon City? Or as places come open, do they go to people who already live in Oregon City? Or do they go to people who are just next on the list regardless of where they live?
There is no preference per city. There is a preference per county. So if you live in some other state somewhere, which some people do apply, anywhere they can get their name on a list and they'll move to get access to a unit, but it's generally a voucher that people will do that for, where they can move anywhere they want. For the county housing authority, for the public housing units, they come off a waiting list. There's no preference for the city you live in. You just have to be extremely low income.
Okay, let's continue.
That wraps up our presentation.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. Any further questions?
No, I had asked when I came back from the meeting that I went to with these two lovely people, and I talked to somebody about coming. They got in touch with Tony, and so I said, the question I had there was, so you have this review and oversight committee, and I wanted to know what cities were represented, were we represented?
Right.
How do we work with the other communities to make it equitable? And that was a comment that came out of one of our discussions here at the commission, is that we want to see a little equity across the bar. So when Dan asked about how many units are in Lake Oswego, we'd like to see Lake Oswego get their fair share. We'd like to see Gladstone get their fair share, and Happy Valley. So everybody is sharing in the burden of providing housing, and that it all doesn't end up in Oregon City. Not that we don't want it, but let's spread the wealth. There's money to go around, let's spread the wealth.
I would love that to be the result of this process.
Okay. Thanks for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Don't know what to do.
So before we get too much farther along here, we are going to, when we get to it, we are going to set off to a date certain of the first meeting in, what day is that?
7th.
August 7th for the 13-391 Resolution 1929 of local long-term obstruction in the right-of-way at 302 3rd Avenue. There have been a couple of requests for us to continue that, and staff wants to do a little more work, so when we get there, we're going to do that. But if you came to testify on that tonight, I will not be taking any testimony. We'll be doing that at the meeting on the 7th. So I just wanted to give you a heads up, that's what we're doing. So with that, we are on to citizen comment on subjects not on the agenda tonight. Do we have anybody?
Yes. Leah Tucker.
Okay, Leah Tucker and
William
Mr. Gifford. Mr.
Hi, I'm Leah Tucker. I'm the Executive Director of the Oregon Mobile Food Association. I've addressed you guys before. Thank you so much, Mayor Holliday and the commissioners, for giving me this moment. I know you have a lot on your schedule, so I won't take too much of your time. I wanted to add on to the letter that I had sent to a previous meeting that I apologize I wasn't able to meet. But I brought additional information for you to read at your convenience. It's a lot of information, but I wanted to get it to you. And also to, again, offer my services, my expertise in mobile food, and in your continued efforts to bring mobile food into Oregon City in a way that represents this community and the first city and how this community really operates. I do want to help with that. I love this city as much as everybody else who's here. And I don't want to see it become a Portland, but I do want to see the business owners represented, community business owners, small business owners represented in the communities that they live. And I think that's really important here in Oregon City especially. So again, I won't take up too much of your time, but I did want to make sure that this information was gotten to you. And thank you again for taking into consideration my time.
Okay, you can give that to Ms. Riggs.
Will do. Thank you.
Mr. Gifford.
My name is William Gifford, and I live in Oregon City. Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, two unrelated things. One is this past legislative session in Salem has been one of the most volatile in anyone's memory. To that end, the Oregon City Business Alliance is going to be hosting a legislative update with our representatives Mark Meek and Christine Drazen, who's, so that'll be next Tuesday at 11:30. Tonight, tomorrow morning, whenever I shut that off, is the last opportunity that we're going to be having for reservations. So, and I think that some of you have signed up, so thank you for that. But it's an opportunity to see our legislators and ask questions, hold their feet to the fire, as it were. The other thing is, I just wanted, in the spirit of transparency, I wanted you to be aware that tomorrow night, the West Advisory Committee is having a presentation by West staff regarding the determination of equivalent dwelling units and how SDCs are determined. So there.
The second part is of interest because of the rate and fee schedule that's coming out and the increase in SDCs, and we're curious how that was arrived at, considering it's going to impact Oregon City more than any other community. And my understanding is you were a voting member of that, and do I understand correctly, you voted in favor of that increase?
Yes.
I'd like to hear the rationale of that, perhaps offline, but the impact on Oregon City and its ability to provide affordable housing and on projects we have pending could be substantial. So we can have that offline conversation, but in fairness to you, I'd like to have that discussion.
I'd be open to that. I've
right.
never received any direction from the commission or any commissioners regarding my activities on that advisory commission. Yeah, but I did want to let you know that there's something coming up tomorrow night, if you'd like to avail yourselves of another meeting.
Would have been nice to know about the other thing ahead of time.
Yeah, see, we did.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I guess my question is, did West tell you that they had not presented any information about the rate increase to the FCCs to
They
the city?
did not.
Well, they didn't.
So maybe you need to start as our representative to the West Advisory Committee, asking them whether they are talking to the cities about specific actions they might take that might affect us.
I would be happy to ask that question. I would point out that I was appointed to that commission, not as a representative of the city commission,
Right.
but as a representative of the ratepayers of West.
No, I get that.
That's what they want.
So,
Okay.
Are the members
want our
voting
input.
members, or is it just by consensus? How did that 100% increase pass?
It's 125%.
How did that pass?
Yes, it was, it's long and complicated. Do you want me to take the time and explain this now?
No,
I
don't.
think we get it.
We get it. Well, there's a difference between talking with cities and talking at cities, and
Yeah.
I'd like to hear that, but not tonight.
Thank you.
Dan, before he leaves, he mentioned two representatives whose one name I'm not familiar with, because I think I know who my representative is.
Christine Drazen
not-
represents,
Not familiar with her.
is the district that Bill Kennemer held.
Basically,
So
South Oregon City and Canby.
And,
Okay, well,
Points
that's why,
south
that's why I
and
don't know who
east.
she is, because that's not
Yeah.
my district.
okay, thank you.
And who was the other one?
Mark Meek.
Oh, my
Yeah.
guy, so, okay.
Jim Nacita and Paul Edgar.
This is unrelated to tonight's event, right?
I will remind you that we are not talking about anything that is on the agenda tonight. Mr. Nacita.
I'm not commenting on any particular agenda item, but I do want to ask that item 8C be removed from the consent agenda, because I would like to comment on it.
Up to me now?
No, Mr. Nacita, if you're going to take your time, or Is that it?
You
I
can
just-
comment on it now if you're wanting to.
Oh, I wasn't ready now. I just want, when we get to the consent agenda, I would like to comment about it at that time.
That's up to the commissioner.
Well, generally, we do not take comments off the consent agenda. Is any of, or any of the commissioners willing to pull that item?
I'm not sure there's an issue, so that's my only, I mean, I read the information.
What is, do you have, yeah, what's the issue that you
I
have?
think there's a public comment and public participation issue with these design standards because there has been no public process on them. The staff report says there was a stakeholder group, but there's been no citizen process for these stormwater grading design standards. The resolution states that it's referring to the 1200C permit. Actually, these grading standards are part of the MS4 permit of the city. Those processes require public process. And they're part of chapter 1312 in the land use, or in the municipal code and the ordinance,
You guys talked to John about it.
the ordinance that adopted the design grading standard, that chapter references goal 11, so this is a land use issue, and there's a public process requirement for land use issues.
We may have to ask Mr. Lewis some questions then, Mr. Holliday.
Fine. What else do you have, sir?
That's all.
Thank you.
So is there going to be a comment on that one, or is,
We haven't gotten there yet. We have not gotten there yet.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Edgar?
I
Oh, really?
Give this up, so for everyone, so.
Just give them to Katie, Paul, so that you can get your.
Here, Jim. Thanks.
I don't need paper.
Thank you. The fact that you pulled the land use thing off of 302 Third Avenue, I wanted to give you a historic tort claim that's been filed against the city based on this property and those people there. And it's critical because it is part of all of the problems that are associated there with this. And I think that it's a read where you need to read it to understand the history of this location.
Mr. Edgar,
Yes,
we're not talking about things that are on the agenda tonight.
this is not on the agenda. You told me, and you told everyone out here,
We are
you had
con-
pulled this off the
We are
agenda.
continuing it, and if you want to testify on it at that time, in the first meeting in August, you're welcome to do that.
I will do that. This was impertinent to it, and the reason why I came up is because you pulled it.
Thank you. Anybody else?
No.
Okay, so moving on. Everybody okay with the agenda?
So we're gonna pull, you wanted to pull?
Well, we probably better ask Mr. Lewis some questions about it then.
Well, let's get
Well,
to
let's wait
there
till we get there.
first.
Right, I agree with you. I totally agree.
General business 19-434 Malala Avenue Streetscape Project update, Mr. Lewis. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Good evening. We're wanting to give you a short update on the, well, short is in the eye of the beholder, I guess, but we want to give you an update on the Malala Avenue project. And we've got, next to me here is Fred Wismer, who's with Kilson Associates. They're actually a sub-consultant to OBEC, whose company name is actually changed to Dow, so that just adds to the confusion of that. But many of you are familiar with Kilson. They've done a fair amount of consulting work for us in the transportation realm, so they're transportation engineers. So I'm going to take on a few of the first slides, pass it off to Fred when he's going to talk through the project and most of the kind of technical details of that, and then flip it back to me and I'll kind of close. So first of all, let's see. Probably remember this project in that it's been around for a little while. We received a grant from Metro for active transportation improvements of $3.8 million. We see the project as about an $8 million project, so the balance of that is covered through transportation system development charges, pavement maintenance fees, utility fees, all in-house other than the $3.8 million that we're getting from Metro. The goal is really to complete a lot of long-term needs in the community to make that boulevard better boulevard than it is today. Definitely with regard to pedestrians and bicyclists, but also a lot of improvements for drivers. So this is a project area map that we've highlighted and definitely talks about the intersections that are affected. Also includes, in the original grant, if you remember, there was 3 mid-block crosswalks, so we've incorporated those into the design as well. There's a entry treatment down on the south end of that. And I guess the other thing that we kind of talked about just before the meeting was there's also some improvements on the north side of Beaver Creek Road that are mostly signalization and striping that we're gonna kind of talk through a little bit. The one thing I wanted to mention about this is that the project as a whole is complicated because first of all, it's a reconstruction of an existing roadway, an existing boulevard. But I also think it's complicated by just the geometry of Malala Avenue and how it comes through Oregon City and how the neighborhoods have developed around it. And the wedge, I call it the wedge between Beaver Creek Road and Malala Avenue, that complicates things. The intersection spacing is not any kind of standard that we would elect to build today. The skewed angle of the intersecting streets complicated a lot. And generally just the number of driveways along this and access management is a challenge for Malala Avenue. So as we pursue solutions to that, I think you're gonna see some elements of that. It feels like in some cases it's a compromise. Malala Avenue moves a lot of traffic and will continue to move a lot of traffic. Part of the objective of this is to find a way to divert some of that traffic onto the higher classification street of Beaver Creek Road. So you're gonna see some proposals for that as well. So just wanted to point that out. Really, we're getting close. We've actually received a 60% design plans. We're about to have an open house. One of the other main reasons for this meeting today was to publicly announce the open house, and it comes up a couple of towards the end of the presentation, but it's July 31st from 5 to 7. So, and it'll be at our operations center on First Street, or the operations complex. That's where we had the first one as well. So the 60% plans, there's a couple of slides on this, but we talk a lot about refinement of the 30% design. And I think that's important to know just because the different phases that happen when we do design projects, it may be obvious, but sometimes it's questionable as to what you're gonna see in a 30% package versus a 60% package versus a 90 and 100%. So they progressively get more and more. I think that 30% package was, for us, from our perspective, mostly about trying to figure out the corridor, what the lanes were gonna look like, how wide they were gonna be, is there gonna be a median or not? And then we start looking at side streets and intersections and just kind of confirming things like, do we need signal changes at locations where there aren't signals? Those kind of things were in the 30% design. Looking at right-of-way impacts, are we gonna need to acquire more right-of-way from property owners where we need to get wider, for instance? So the 60% is much more refined. We know a lot more about the turn lanes for the side streets. We know a lot more about the impacts. We know a lot more about, kind of how we need to figure out driveway access issues, and definitely a lot more about, storage in the turn pockets along those driveways, how much we need from that. So a lot more detail in this. We're starting to see some other elements like street lighting, and we've done a lot of work on a water line. There's a 18-inch water line that we've added that pretty much goes from Beaver Creek Road to near 213. Street trees, what those cross sections look like with regard to that, where we're gonna, put the different water amenities. And like I said, a lot about the signals is starting to play out now in terms of programming, what we call split phase. I'll let the expert talk about some of that, but grading and erosion control, corner radius treatments, we're really kind of digging into those. Do we need an extra turn pocket for the side street lanes, for instance, just to kind of accommodate better turning movements there? So it's really kind of further refining those things. So we're busy right now looking at that 30% or 60% set of plans. We continue to outreach to the public, and that happens in many ways. There's a lot of stakeholders in this project, clearly. There's those that are right on the boulevard, businesses and residents that are right on the boulevard, and citywide, countywide. Malal Avenue carries a lot of county traffic, right? We're seeing a lot of cut-through traffic that tends to not stop on Malal, but just drives through town and get further outside the city on 213. How do we reach all those folks? Well, it's a challenge, I can tell you. In our last open house, I think we had 27 people besides the team that were there. We had a pretty large team assembled, and we sent over 900 letters to the folks local to that area. And social media, we still didn't get much of a turnout there. We're hoping for something better. Our intent this time is to maybe place some reader board signs the day before the meeting or a day or two before the meeting to get that drive-through traffic, but we'll see how that goes. Hopefully, if you're interested, you can show, but please share that with folks that you talk to that we're gonna have that open house. Some of the tools, again, we've been using that I think are typical to what we like to do, but don't always get to do on the smaller projects. But in this case, we've got a list. I would say the stakeholder database is more of a spreadsheet, but we're tracking those folks. We've got a pretty robust website. So anybody that, short messaging, cards, letters, we're going to refer to that project website and give folks an opportunity to look at that. We've got our second newsletter. I put a copy of that on your at your dais. That is going to go out. We're hoping to get that out tomorrow. Again, we did one round of a community survey, got limited response as well. I know that there was some good feedback and not so good feedback on that. So we are keeping track of all of that. Again, the open house that I mentioned on the 31st of this month. And we continue to coordinate with the neighborhood associations to the degree we can. They're definitely a key stakeholder and groups that we're interested in finding solutions to problems that they raise. I think, again, in at least the last meeting we had with Amy and Angela, who are in the audience, was just acknowledgement of some of the compromises that are required just based on the geometry of the roadway. Trying to connect with businesses. Surprisingly, there's a few of them that, despite letters and calls, don't respond well. And so we're trying to find other ways to reach them. And so anyway, we've had some success with that. We have talked to several property owners as well. So we think we're doing a good job there. I just find that until you really impact someone, until they are impacted by the lane closures during construction, or until they realize, oh, there's a median here, and that's going to affect how I get to and from business, they don't get too excited about it. We'd like them to engage now versus after the thing is built. So, again, we're going to talk through the details of this, and Fred will give you more on this, but I just generally want to go through the list of project characteristics. Malala and Beaver Creek, future northbound dual left turn lanes. You're going to see what that looks like, but that is an effort to take traffic from Malala Avenue and put it onto Beaver Creek Road. The mid-block crosswalks, pedestrian activated mid-block crosswalks, buffered bike lanes, Claremont and Gaffney Lane, both those intersections are going to see different signal phasing and lane layouts, so we'll be sharing that with you. A new traffic signal at Fur. Again, access management for driveways is kind of can be a hot ticket item depending on the property owner. Widened sidewalks. We did receive the grant for the cross street banner, so we're going to plan to find a place for that. And then we've got this gateway welcome feature, which we're going to show you.
John, question. Yeah. So you're going to have the light at Beaver Creek, the light at
Claremont, Gaffney,
and Fur.
Yeah.
So are those going to talk to each other?
Yes, they'll all be interconnected signals.
So that, somebody getting the green at Beaver Creek might possibly be able to get all the way to 213 without having to stop 4 times?
You'd like to think so?
Yes, we would like to think so.
Keep in mind, there's pedestrian interruption of that could happen, but in that scenario where these signals are smart. I'll let, can you answer that? When we
So
get there?
I mean-
Let's get there, but I mean, the
Here's
incentives are
what I'm
interconnected.
trying to get to. So if you're going into Portland on our side of the river and you get into that very first stretch of, is it MLK or whatever it is nowadays, if you go 30 miles an hour, you can go all the way to Weidler without ever stopping. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about this here.
So that's, if I'm thinking of the same place, that's a one-way as well?
They're both one-way.
It's Grand and MLK.
Yeah,
The
it's
lights
like
are
a couplet,
timed.
if you
Yes.
will, right?
Right.
So the signals that you hit at 30 miles an hour are one way. I think it gets more complicated when you got two-way traffic, and I'll let Fred kind of touch on that, because I'm gonna get, well, for one, this is my last slide for a little bit. And I'd much rather give it to Fred to answer. So you wanna?
Yeah, so as John said, the project originally started at Beaver Creek going to 213. Post 30% design, we heard some safety concerns, analyzed the traffic volumes a little bit more. And the first concern we kind of heard was nobody likes that merge lane right as you get through the intersection, because you get cars racing through there. And then you got to merge down right before you get to the single lane by the restaurant there. So the
Are we
first
talking
thing.
about this picture?
Yes.
right here,
So as you go right is south.
where you merge.
You merge right by the care home.
Right.
Yes. So the first thing we're going to do, and we're going to look at doing this before construction even starts, is really a striping and signal exercise on Molalla north of Beaver Creek. And it starts way back at Warner Milne, where we're going to take, that's where the road opens up to two southbound lanes. We're going to take the inside lane and convert that to a left turn lane, so that as you get to Beaver Creek here, it's a dual left turn with only a single lane going through south of Molalla. The goal is that we can divert traffic from Molalla to the higher classifications facilities of Beaver Creek and OR 213 and get people from cutting through the corridor. This goes back to one of the main project goals of trying to increase pedestrian and bicycle safety. And the biggest way we can do that is fewer cars. So we're going to implement this hopefully at the start of construction. We'll put it out there to the contractors, but this should lighten up the traffic going through the corridor during construction, as well as give residents a better access around the corridor during construction.
So what is converting people from going down Molalla Avenue and 7th to Beaver Creek Road? How does it doesn't really accomplish anything, because they're just going to come back and go on Lynn Avenue, or they've got to get down the hill somewhere.
We're not changing it that direction. We're changing it as you come up the hill going to 213. As you're going
All right.
southbound,
This is, yeah, I'm confused.
the existing left turn lane there that you see against the double yellow stripes is too short to hold the queue of what we really need to do to get cars going up to 213.
Okay.
So by converting that inside through lane to a left turn lane, we can,
All right, I couldn't see it on the map.
I apologize, it's kind of hard to see
Pointed it out
with
to me.
the background there.
And this
is-
looks like
this
it's
is straight
existing
on.
today. This is not existing. This is what would be in.
So to be clear, at the top of the picture, we have the 76 station.
Correct.
And the bank across the street. And so, yeah, so it's,
Yeah,
Okay.
north is left, east is up. So
So you're showing
There's a
two
bank,
lanes
that's-
turning on to Beaver, making a left
turning on
onto
the Beaver
Creek,
Creek Road to get up to 213.
and only one going straight.
Correct. So we eliminate the merge right as you go through the intersection.
Yeah.
Which hopefully reduces the traffic load on Molalla Avenue, because we were seeing a huge number of cars just taking a right turn down at 213, which to us indicates they're just cutting through this corridor because it's easy. So we want to get them to Beaver Creek and 213 where they should be, not cutting through our neighborhood collector, and thereby increase our pedestrian and bicycle safety.
okay?
So, and like I said, we're gonna try to implement that at the start of construction so we can get cars moving around the construction easier, which also increases safety during those activities. The next slide is once we get through Beaver Creek to Claremont. So before I get too far into this, with TriMet, we've been coordinating all their stop locations throughout the corridor, as well as updating them to TriMet's current standards. So anytime you do a construction project, TriMet comes in and puts their stops in to their new standards or current standards. And that current standard is stops go on the far side of traffic signals. So essentially what it means is they can get through the traffic signal on a yellow, let people off, and then continue down the line while the signal's still red. And they're not stuck on the backside of the signal. So it's what they do. Every project,
Well, I know, but that's assuming the bus is always the first one to get to the yellow.
it's assuming the bus is through, but it at least allows the bus to continue on after, if the light's red.
All right.
Well, the other piece to that is it may not be yellow. It may be the end of the green phase. By the time they pull over, pick up whoever, they may be in a yellow phase, and their idea would be to be able to take off while that light is red. Now, that doesn't necessarily consider the side street turn movements, but again, that's their standard. In this case, it leaves the bus stop where it is today, which we've also heard is a preference. So we're trying to, I think we showed this in a different, we may have shown this in a
It
different
doesn't change it
location
at this intersection, it does change it at Gaffney.
before.
Okay.
We're coordinating with them. With this block here, we have the first mid-block crossing there at Adrian Street, right by the Black Rock. And TriMet also identified this as a potential mid-block crossing in a safety study they did a number of years ago. I don't remember what year it was, but
So it's been a long time. It was part of the grant application as well. This is one of the three. Okay. The median is the one that I think we should talk about on this slide.
yeah, so there will be a median there prohibiting left in and left out to right there at the Black Rock driveway. And I want to hold on that just a little bit. The next slide shows the different access points all around the center there. But the reason this median isn't any longer is the queue for Beaver Creek Road as you go northbound is 350 feet. We're trying to allow on this project enough room in the future when the volumes demand to be able to put that second left turn lane in, which is what John mentioned on the slide prior. So where the yellow hash marks are, is that will eventually be another turn lane when the when the volumes warrant that addition. We don't want to do it now because we'd have to replace the signal pole on the other side of the intersection to have a longer mast arm, and we don't have funding for that.
So how are you supposed to get into right now, you cannot turn into the Southridge Shopping Center up by where the Goodwill is. You have to turn to get into it at Wells Fargo and the coffee place. That's where you have to turn to get in. So if I'm going to Bi-Mart, that is where I go to turn in, because if you go to the next driveway, the turn lane's in the opposite direction and there's nowhere, you can't turn there. Now, I'm not saying other people don't do it, but I don't do it because it's going in the wrong direction. So if you put a median there, how am I getting to Bi-Mart?
So great segue into the next slide, so what we're gonna do is right now, exactly, that's a right or a restricted access driveway. With this project, we'll make that a full access
Which one's
driveway. The one right by Goodwill.
Okay, yes, it's restricted access.
So
right
we're
now.
gonna make that a full access driveway, so you can turn left in and left out
Okay,
of that driveway. The driveway by Black Rock will become a right in, right out only, which enhances pedestrian safety for the crossing right there.
okay.
If we have if we try to allow a left out, it conflicts with the PED's crossing, especially during peak hour when there's very few gaps, because the queue from Beaver Creek pretty much spills back to that intersection. So then you get impatient drivers making bad decisions while pedestrians crossing, and we don't want that.
They're already making bad decisions and there are no pedestrians.
Denise, I'm learning a few things about you. You're kind of set in your ways sometimes, I'll just say that. Market of choice, you need to find a market in Oregon City there. In this situation, I think what we're trying to do is encourage you through that dual left turn as you're coming up the hill from McLaughlin neighborhood to use the entrances off of Beaver Creek Road. for the places that you want to get. That's what we're trying to encourage through the addition of the left turn. That's one of the things that it does, okay?
Okay, so I don't want to use myself as the example, so we're saying the places that you want to get to.
Wherever that is, where you were using that driveway, with that Adrian driveway or the Black
Whatever,
Rock driveway,
yeah.
whatever that was, I don't know which particular business you were trying to get to,
Primark.
but the suggestion would be, the best way to do that would be to come off of Molalla at Beaver Creek in that turn lane.
I understand that, but you know,
Okay.
we're all creatures of habit. I don't shop at anything on that side of it, so why would I go there? Why would I use that entrance?
Because you'll have to.
I know that's what he's saying, but I'm telling him, I don't go to Burger King, I don't go to the bank there, I don't do anything over there, I'm over here. So you go to
we
the,
can move
go,
on.
keep moving on, keep moving on.
That's part of why we took the striping change all the way back to Warner Milne though, so that if somebody gets trapped in that lane and they're wanting to go to the shopping center, they can still just take a right off of Beaver Creek and in they go. We're not making them loop around everything, so. The next block is showing between Gaffney and Claremont, and before I get on and between those two, at both the approaches on Claremont and Gaffney from the west, so the neighborhood side and the shopping center sides, we are changing the signal phasing to be permitted protected, so a dedicated left turn lane with the outside lane being a through right lane. What this allows is for the left turns out of those side streets or business accesses to have that free flow left turn, so you're no longer waiting for the pedestrian to cross. You don't have to wait for the through traffic to come through. You get your turn, and then if there's a pedestrian wanting to cross, they get their turn while the traffic going straight gets to go. So it's more of the traditional protected, permitted phasing that you would see on an intersection like this. With that, it does provide better protection for crossing pedestrians because you don't have vehicles trying to catch that gap of turning left when all the cars are coming straight. So it gives, they don't have to watch for the pedestrians. The pedestrians can cross without that left turn movement coming up on them.
Well, given some of our recent problems, the other thing I want to mention about this is, you know, we're talking about adding the crosswalk on the Burgerville corner that's not there today. And, you know, so the comment they don't have to worry about, drivers and pedestrians, I just want to throw this out there, need to be making eye contact no matter what the signal shows for them, right? I don't dig on that
Sorry.
too much, but we definitely want pedestrians to not only pay attention to the signal, but pay attention to the driver that could be turning into them. Okay.
And then in this block, due to the traffic queues and access spacing, we are putting in a raised median from right around the driveway there at Joanne up to Gaffney Lane to restrict left turns across the across the block essentially. So both Joanne and Burgerville along Molalla will be a right in, right out movement. And then if anything ever develops on that empty spot of Fred Meyer there, it'll be a right in, right out.
The former Elmer's.
So. And then from Gaffney, we'll have, I already talked about Gaffney, and then First Street, we'll have a new signal there. And that one will not have the permitted protected phasing just because the west side of that is a driveway. So anticipating very low volumes out of that you won't have that conflicting through movement all day long like we do at Gaffney and Claremont. Then moving south of Fur, we have our second mid-block crossing, and I apologize, the graphics off a tiny bit. Our first mid-block crossing south of the post office before you get to the fire station. So not where it currently is today at Garden Meadow. And that's because you'll have protected crossings at the signal at Fur. And we wanted to put some distance between the crossings. So we moved it, or we're proposing it down by the post office, which also better aligns with where the TriMet stop will be and is today. And then also, it still allows access for the fire trucks to get back into their station if they're coming south on Molalla. It allows for any cars coming out of the post office to take a left on Molalla. But those are the only two left turning movements you get at that location. So.
Wait, before you move on. So this this is one of those compromise areas, right? To me, this was a tough one. We heard from the neighborhood a strong desire to put that crosswalk at Garden Meadow Drive. And I understand that's where it is today. We had the signal spacing issue. We've also got these driveways, multiple driveways. And as we looked at the driveways, as we looked at the need to be in the turn lane for Garden Meadow, I really have been, over the years, have struggled with that median I think we required that medium, that little bit of an island right there at that crosswalk when Wilco was developed. And it has continued to be, nobody, as far as I know, there haven't been pedestrian car accidents there. I don't recall if you saw that, but the median gets hit regularly. So it's just, to me, it's just a matter of time. That combined with the fact that, yeah, we've kind of got the turn pocket and the through lane detection as an issue. So again, we think this is a compromise. We think it gets us to where the pedestrian generators are. We'd love to work with the post office, although it's a federal office, so I'm not sure how easy that's going to be to work with them, but we'd love to work with them on, right now, their sidewalk has the mailboxes, drop boxes right in the middle of their actual access sidewalk, so it'd be better. There's another option for getting there, but it requires crossing of their driveways, so,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, sorry, taking too long
I
here.
lost you on that last comment about the post office. You said the mailboxes or?
The drop boxes. So as you do the drive-through at the drop box, those drop boxes, there's 4, I think,
Yeah.
there. They're right in the middle of their sidewalk, so there's no way for a person in a wheelchair or with access limitations to be able to get by those. They have to go further north, and well, I'm not going to use a pointer, but there's a driveway kind of on the north side of their main access point that would be more ADA accessible.
Go ahead.
Question about streetlights. Because we've done Molalla in multiple phases and other parts of Molalla have had small developments that have put in sidewalks and streetlights. I know in early talking about some of those first phases of Molalla Avenue was anticipated that new sections would have the matching streetlights. So we have throughout Oregon City essentially what looks sort of like the same streetlight, but if you look at downtown and various sections of Molalla, there's maybe 3-4 different variations of the same streetlight, some in style, but also in color. So there's the bright white lights, and then there's sections of Molalla that are kind of the orange lights. What are we trying to do to make that look better? And as since this is a massive phase of Molalla Avenue, are we trying to then make sure that the rest of Molalla Avenue ties with that?
Thank you. That's a good question and a good observation. So the yellow lights are the high pressure sodium
Right.
that were installed at that time of day.
Right.
Most everything is LED. We've got LED match styles, right? They've got a different black cap. I don't know if you noticed on top of them, but anyway, they're decorative and they're acorn style lights. So this would be LED, so they'd be the brighter white. But the others that we have, we're converting, but they're expensive to convert. So we
Right.
do it
But
under
as
our,
we replace them,
we do it
we
under
put
our
them-
streetlight budget, and we, I don't know, do 18 or so a year.
Okay.
But we will be converting them along this corridor to get that consistent light. And we're actually looking at those light levels to make sure they meet standards through the corridor. And where we need extras, like at a mid-block crossing like this, we're adding them on the east side of the road as well, just to make sure we're really providing a safe crossing for those pedestrians and the right light levels.
Thank
So
you.
I'm getting the hurry up from Mayor Holliday here. So the next one we get to is the final mid-block crossing at Char Diaz and Lazy Creek. This one was, once again, one of those compromises of all the left turns, but also trying to get it equally spaced and to the point of pedestrian generators, both the TriMet stop and the shopping center, OC Point. The final point I'd like to make is with the mid-blocks, TriMet puts their stop on the downstream side essentially. So if you cross the mid-block, you cross behind the bus, not in front of the bus. So they drop you off on the far side of the crossing so that you can then go behind them. So that's one of their other standards that they're implementing now. And the other thing about this location is when we met with TriMet, they brought out their ridership numbers and they said they wanted to consolidate the two stops that are here into one. So that's what we've done here is taken the one that's kind of on the corner there, right at Five Guys and Starbucks and all that. And we've consolidated with the one here just at the storage units, which provides better sight distance and better safety. As you come around that corner, you're not all of a sudden smack into a bus and then a pedestrian running across the street at the same point. So I'll pass it back to John.
So this is really more of a 90% slide, but I wanted to make sure you were aware that we're seeing the early considerations for construction impacts, and we're acknowledging that and wanting you to start thinking about that, because while it's wonderful to think of this as a finished product, we've got a solid year at least of construction through there. The one thing that many people don't know is, aside from all the above ground amenities, we've got, the water line, we've talked about the sewer line, but the Molalla section, the road section itself, is an old highway section. There's some of the old concrete road panels in that roadway. All of that roadway section, really from Beaver Creek, we're talking about maybe where we end that somewhere past Fur, or can we afford to take it all the way to the end of the project? But trying to reconstruct all that stuff where those signalized intersections are at, for sure. Take that as far as we can, and I mean that's likely going to be something more like a 24-inch road section where there'll be fabric, rock, asphalt, and several layers of asphalt. So just imagine what that might look like on a corridor like that. We're going to have to go flagging one way each direction. We're probably going to ask you about the potential for nighttime construction, because we are in some areas here in a residential neighborhood, but there's some areas where not doing it at night is going to be quite problematic. As you can tell from the little bit of construction that's going on at the corner of Molalla and Warner Milne, right?
Is that gonna be over?
Talk
to Jeff, it's supposed to be a week, 10 days.
We will keep talking about this, but I mean, business access, we're keen to that. A campaign for we're open to business, that we want to hit that. Last little thing is these gateway design concepts. I think, after looking at a variety of options, ODOT has been pretty rigid on the fact that, we get anywhere near their facility and we're going to be looking at one more signal replacement for them. So we don't want to go there. We're trying to pull back as much as we can, which means we're really not changing much in the way of curb to curb width. So at one point in time, we wanted a median here that would make that feel a little bit more like a entryway. At this point, we're looking at just enhancement of the landscaping and possibly some features, whether they be basalt or metal panels of some sort, like what we have at Dunes Drive in 99E. And then it's really just this, what I understand is called an allée in landscape architecture terms, which is really just enhanced large, probably dug fir trees that's set back, but it would be more like a tree canopy that you would pass through. We're going to have our open house again on July 31st from, where's the
It's on the
timeline?
last slide.
5 to 7.
Yeah. 90% plans in October, final plans, bidding in January. Again, we're going to have a full year of construction, I'm sure. Questions? And yes, 5 to 7 on the 31st at First Street Complex.
Questions?
Comment.
Go ahead.
Question?
I just hope that we've made every effort to engage these businesses and the possible impact that the change in traffic flow has on them, and I hope they've provided input so they don't get surprised. I don't know that that's happened. And secondly, I saw an exchange of letters between the Gaffney Lane folks and ourselves. Is that an ongoing conversation, or is that our final conversation with that group?
To me, it's ongoing. It was a response to the letter to try and put some closure to that. I heard from the commission that they appreciated getting the letter, and we agree with that. It was a good letter. And we felt like some of those issues are complex and still ongoing, right? I mean, the access to some of these commercial driveways, Fred Meyer, for instance, just trying to figure out how to do those lane reconfigurations. It'd be nice to be able to actually, communicate with them, and we're trying. And so, those kind of issues come up, and I think we're We're working on design plans. I don't see big changes, but access to the shopping center those are always key issues. And there may be other details beyond kind of lane configurations and signalization that we want to work with all the stakeholders, including the neighborhood on. So I think that's an ongoing conversation. My email's pretty active and my phone number's available. The website's active. Dana, by the way, who I didn't even mention, I apologize for that, Dana, but Dana's the project manager on this thing, so she's pretty dedicated to that.
Commissioner McGriff, you had something?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions for John. You're very aware that this is, one of my absolutely second favorite topics is transportation planning, besides planning. So, because you suspected, and you're correct, that you didn't get a good response from the business owner, so is the next step to just walk into Bi-Mart and say, hey, I need to speak to the store manager?
I don't know if that's the next step.
Well, I mean, it's
but-
one of the steps. It's
Yeah.
probably the only way you're gonna get their attention, is you need to go in and tap them on this time consuming.
We've done some of that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Because they're just not gonna respond. So then the second thing, I mean, I'm half serious about the construction on the corner there,
Which corner?
the corner of Warner Milne and Malala Avenue. So what I have a concern about with Malala Avenue is that obviously it's supposed to be taking a little more traffic than some of the other streets, and although Beaver Creek Road is there, but some people don't go on Beaver Creek for whatever reason, they're going Malala. So what I see is that, and to quote John Replinger, is that we're all gonna have to take a little more traffic congestion. However, what I'm concerned about is the continued ongoing platooning of the traffic on Malala Avenue. It's gotten to the point now to where I personally have been at Hilda and Holmes. I can see all the way down to Beaver Creek, and all I see is a line of cars, no gaps. And so when did we get away from the fact that we don't need 2 lanes in each direction on Malala Avenue, which is supposed to be carrying a lot of traffic? It's got high traffic volumes, I'm assuming. I don't know what they are anymore, I used to know. But the 1 lane, it does not seem to be working. Traffic is just backing up. You see people waiting to turn and they can't get in because there's no gaps. And it's just a line of cars as far as you can see. I just don't know that that is acceptable. And I just have a concern about it from the standpoint of the whole factor of, we're all willing to take some congestion, but if you can't even get anywhere because there's just one continual line of cars.
Well, but that's a problem just due to the construction there. As soon as
It's before the construction.
No, it's not. I travel that all the time.
Me
And,
too.
and there is only a couple of specific short periods of time in the afternoon without that road construction, in place that is right now. You rarely have to wait, more than a minute or so to get through that section.
We could probably tell you the specific minute or time frame that peak hour is. It's definitely, there's peak and there's times when there's backups. I can't deny that. Malala Avenue has a lot of history. 7th Avenue has a lot of history. Most of those long-range plans for what Malala would look like. The access management plan I know was dated 2001.
I remember that. I was trying to remember when we got away from keeping
Well,
multiple lanes.
You might be on that list, I'm not sure. But I wasn't here at the time, but that decision was made years ago, I guess is what I'm saying. And so, and I guess lane widening, for one, we wouldn't have gotten this grant for that kind of a project.
Oh, I'm sure.
And just thinking about the property acquisition that we're dealing with on Myers Road, for instance, we're probably paying a premium for that.
Okay, I think we're a little off base now. So any other questions from the commission? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And
I'll get back to you, John.
Ms. Wilhite, if you want to come up. What?
No, I'm done.
Oh, man. Can we sit next to one another?
Of course we can.
She's got a cane.
I
Thank you,
saw that.
commissioners. My MRI was yesterday, but I have to wait to find out what's going on with my knee. Thank you. I'm Amy Wilhite, citizen of Oregon City. I want to make it clear that while I am the chair of the Gaffney Lane, I'm representing myself tonight because we haven't had an official meeting to give me authority to talk. We have met. Angela is my secretary treasurer. She's here tonight, and Dana and John have met with us several times. We appreciate their time. I would like to say it's more capitulation than compromise that's been happening. I don't know where to start. My blood pressure went through the roof. No offense, John, but we feel that our neighborhood is basically being said, whatever Kittleson says, that's what we're doing, whether it makes sense or not. We live there. We understand that numbers show certain things, but we think we've come up with some good ideas. But when we meet, we're told, nope, that's not what Kittleson said. But in the emails we get, we're like, oh, hey, maybe we should look at that. But then, nope, Kittleson said no. Well, so who's running the show? And I get that they're the engineers, and I understand that, but there's some things that I don't understand. Just even here tonight, talking about going southbound, they say we're gonna create 2 lanes and encouraging people to use Beaver Creek. But when we're going northbound, which is where the people in my neighborhood and the Caulfield neighborhood come in, you can't make any left turns to go home. So if we want to use those businesses, we have to, they say, go behind the businesses and use the Claremont light. That would take you through a little alley between the 2 stores where the trucks parked to unload, and then around all of the containers, and then willy-nilly through a parking lot. That's not, in my mind, or they say, well, then just go use Beaver Creek. So I say, why are we spending so much time? If we're trying to divert traffic onto Beaver Creek, why aren't we looking at it both ways? It doesn't feel like we're looking at it both ways. We have to put in a light at First Street because there's so much traffic. Well, would there be so much traffic if we were trying to encourage them to use Beaver Creek? If we made it not so convenient for the through traffic to use Molalla, but for us that live there and have to use it? I think that we should weigh in here more than the people coming from Molalla. They say they have to put that median to close the BlackRock Wells Fargo because they need a longer turn lane and they're gonna need 2. Well, that is just saying you're taking into consideration that the people coming from 213 way more than their needs, way more than our needs in the neighborhood. And I think that we've met, we've talked, and I feel like we have ideas, but they're just being thrown out the window. I'm really sad that not more of our neighbors went to the meeting. I would like to see them come on July 31st, but take into account, they talk to us. We are their representatives as the leadership of Gaffney Lane. And so when we go and we share information, it's not just my opinion that I'm giving. I'm sharing that for the whole neighborhood. So some of the emails and the letters that threw it back gaslighting towards us, it's not just my opinion. This is the whole neighborhood. And so I do appreciate being able to work with them, but don't kid yourself that there's a lot of compromise going on. It's capitulation.
Thank you.
I share the same sentiments.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Lewis. I'm moving on.
Okay. Thank you.
So, hold on. Did you take the one item off already?
I just skipped it. Is
Oh,
that what you?
No, because we need a motion and to a date certain.
Oh, I thought you were, I'm sorry. I
So can we have a
misunderstood.
motion for continuance to a date certain of August 7th?
So moved.
Second.
To make it clear, this is for resolution number 19-29.
Yes.
Item
Sorry.
7B.
Correct.
Okay, call roll.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. Okay. And before we get started here, we're going to take about a 5-minute break because this next item is apparently going to take a little while.
I have more of them, so I get all that stuff, so.
Okay, we are back to order. Before we move on to this next item, staff has come to me and asked that rather than pulling and discussing item 8C 19-375, resolution number 1926, updated public works, stormwater, and grading design standards, they're going to take that back and have a further discussions before they bring it to the city commission.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so moving on then, we are at 19-432, resolution number 19-13, modification of planning division fee schedule. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. The Planning Division has proposed amendments to our fee schedule for a couple of different reasons. One is to adopt new fees to address some of the new processes that we've adopted with our recent amendments to our code, which include the equitable housing. Those are effective on August 2nd. Also, we have some new fees to recover costs of services that we currently provide. So there's some options for fees or things that we don't charge for at the moment. And then we also have some rewarded fees for clarity and some revisions for fees to have an adoption of a flat fee rather than a fee that's based on whoever is working on that application, their hourly rate, just to provide more certainty and clarity to the public. We discussed the proposed fees at the July work session. You recall at the July work session, we talked about, we've spent a significant amount of discussion regarding appeal fees. Right now, we have a planning commission appeal fee, which sets a base fee as well as an actual city attorney rate. Within this proposal, we first off want transparency and clarity. So we wanted again to do a base fee or a single rate fee rather than a fee where if someone applies, they don't really know how much they're having to pay because of the actual city attorney cost component. So we did a calculation of the average fees paid in the last 10 years. There were 3, and then we added that to the base fee. There was a lot of discussion about that from the city commission at the work session. And though there was some uneasiness with that, you directed staff to keep the rate the same and then discuss it more tonight. Also at that last work session, there was just direction from the city commission to revise the historic review board appeal fee as well, which was previously $50. So we did similar methodology. We averaged the rate from the appeals for the city attorney's fees for the last 10 years and added that same base rate fee for the planning commission as the appeal process is the same to the city commission. So that ended up with a resulting cost of $6,460. So we didn't do any policy decisions to change any of the rates as directed by the city commission. We just have the numbers for your further discussion. There are also some fees in here. There's a couple reductions as well. For example, a 3 to 4plex is being reduced from over $3,000 to about $500, $510. And then our minimum rate for commercial projects for plan review is reduced into half as well to account for smaller projects. So I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take the public comment and then we will have a commission discussion. Barbara Rankin and Bob LaSalle.
You should pass these out.
Go ahead and give them to me.
She already has. Right? Oh, no.
Nope.
Oh, and while they're passing out, one more thing is that we did have a few public comments that we submitted to you guys today.
Yes, I've seen them.
And among that were some requests for continuances as well.
Okay, Ms. Rankin.
Good evening, I'm Barbara Rankin. I'm a resident of the Park Place neighborhood of Oregon City. After watching the city work session, July 9th, 2019, I would like to share my thoughts on the subject of appeals and the fee schedule suggested by staff. First, a bit of background for those that are new to the commission. I served for two-year terms on the Citizen Involvement Committee as a member and as secretary. I was also a member of the Public Involvement Plan in 2016, which was formed by Laura Turway to establish goals to create more interest enthusiasm, and involvement in local neighborhoods of Oregon City. All participating in the plan shared the uniqueness of their neighborhood and its involvement or lack of. The one thing almost every neighborhood had in common was a sense that the staff really wasn't listening to the citizens' feelings, comments, and concerns. There was little or no feedback from staff discussing those issues. The plan moved ahead to the City Commission and was voted on. Consequently, even in Park Place, participation at general meetings has fallen off because of this. Several times in the past, our neighborhood has had 40 to 50 people expressing their concerns at planning and city commission meetings with little feedback unless one or two individuals contacted a staff member directly. I really feel the public involvement plan would resolve some of those issues and was enthusiastic about it. And as it turns out, I was mistaken. What appears to have resulted is that the staff is more focused on moving forward with plans as presented at CIC meetings without citizen resolution or reconciliation, and the citizens have become less involved due to lack of support for their concerns. Even the CIC attendance is down. No one is listening to us. To charge an outrageous fee that few, if any, can afford to defend their right as a citizen will be yet another obstacle in gaining the confidence of the citizens. Oregon City homeowners already pay some of the highest taxes in the state. The city staff has 3 pages of fees already being charged for various improvements and modifications, not to mention various bonds in the process of being paid. I hope you're listening. You know what I'm talking about because you live here, you commissioners. Many of the staff do not. You are a citizen representing your fellow citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. LaSalle?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Bob LaSalle, and I live in Oregon City. And I really must object to the proposed fee to appeal a planning commission decision. The proposed fee of $10,477 is a slap in the face to the average citizen. Who could possibly afford that except someone quite rich and or large corporations? I know I couldn't. But they could probably find a way to write it off on their taxes. This is a terribly unfair proposal and effectively blocks the average citizen from participating in city government and have a chance at justice. I applaud staff for trying to be fiscally responsible, but to make such a proposal as a reaction to 3 appeals in 10 years seems a bit much. The comparison made to Walmart, the Walmart issue, was way unfair and way out of line of the average appeal. Who can afford Walmart's attorneys to bring forth an appeal? And that's what it really boiled down to. I agree that if an appeal is lost, city attorney fees should be reimbursed, but not if the appeal is upheld, and certainly not staff time. Also, during the meeting of July 9th, it seemed to get off track as somehow the cost charged for Historic Review Board appeals was brought up. The Planning Commission and the Historic Review Board are 2 different entities and should not be considered together. Another thing that bothers me is charging appellants staff time. Don't we taxpayers already pay them to do what they do? Research on a daily basis? And how much research needs to be done on issues that are appealed that are already on the record from previous meetings? Should I be charged for objecting in court for a traffic fine? Will that be the next thing? Will I be charged for a traffic study in relation to a traffic safety issue I bring up? I appeal to you to consider the average citizen in your decision and not allow a knee-jerk proposal to guide city policy. Keep city government within reach of the average guy. And I would ask for a continuance on this due to the quantity of the fee adjustments. You know, this isn't the only fee adjustment they're talking about. There's dozens of them. in there. So thank you for your attention and consideration.
Thank you, sir. Okay. We don't do clapping. Okay? Yes, we do. Carl Laws and Paul Egger. Go ahead.
My name's Carla. I live on Roosevelt Street. I'm coming in about the fees adjustment because as an average resident, I'm not coming in as chair of Barclay Hills, but I know as neighborhood association, if for instance, you're gonna get neighborhood support, you would be presented and then, as the board, you'd have no idea on what to decide. And then you'd need to do research and there'd be another steering committee meeting, and then there'd be another meeting. And I think people should be able to represent themselves without necessarily having the neighborhood association backup. Obviously, someone mentioned before, someone privileged could actually be the only person who could defend themselves in terms of an appeal. So I am against it, and that's just where I stand, so thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Egger?
Thank you. Paul Edgar, Oregon City. This is really just a poll tax. If I could go back to segregational days when we went ahead and put a poll tax on to prevent blacks from voting. This is an outright effort to prevent people from appealing anything or being involved. This curtails citizen participation in a massive way. It effectively eliminates it. To say that a historic review board ruling should be appealed and it can't be appealed, to put $6,000 tag on saying what it is. Let's look at something like Lake Oswego where it's $250, where they actually have people come in, but they actively reach out, and they don't have a lot of this activity because they solicit citizen input. We should be thinking about trying to be proactive too in how we interact with our neighborhoods and with our individuals. So all I'm saying is the U.S. Congress and the President of the United States passed an amendment to the U.S. Constitution, Amendment 24, to eliminate poll taxes. And that's literally what this is right now. Thank you.
Thank you. James Cedar and Jesse Buss.
Good evening. I'm James Nasita. I live in Oregon City. I'm going to add my voice to the requests for continuances. I asked Paul Edgar and Jesse Buss to be witnesses to the fact that we were all at the moot hearing on the DEQ agreement with the Grand Ronde tribe for the Blue Heron site, and my computer fell onto the floor and it's broken and I can't retrieve what I wanted to submit tonight as comments, so I'd like to be able to do that. Having said that, I'll just go through some off-the-cuff comments. I think this commission should consider whether this is a legislative hearing under OCMC 17.50.170 subsection A, because this resolution is an other policy document, because you are exercising judgment and discretion, for example, on what is reasonable. If it is, this whole change needs to start in the Planning Commission. So I will leave that for you and the attorney to decide. The calculation in this does not comply with ORS 227-181C, which is the statute that authorizes these fees. That statute requires a demonstration of actual or average costs. The fee that has been given to you doesn't meet that standard. It basically double counts the base fee. The three figures you've been given of those three appeals in the past 10 years, already in those three appeals are both base fee and attorney's fees. So the average of the three already includes the average of the base fee, and then you're tacking on the base fee on top of that. So you're hitting people double with the base fee. That doesn't comply with the standard. This is a land use decision that requires findings based on substantial evidence in the record. There is no explanation as to the data or information used to come up with the three figures cited in the staff report. I think you all know why. I know that it consists of the base fee and the attorney's fees already. Any other figure proposed as an alternative tonight would just be setting up a fee based on personal judgment and off the cuff. And that doesn't meet the standard either. The statute requires a demonstration of an average or actual cost and findings on what is reasonable. The attorney fee provision of actual attorney fees, I think just should be removed totally. And I base that on my own experience in my last appeal, where I was given billing statements from the city of attorney that were blank. It showed so many hours. I don't know what I paid for. I was billed for something I don't know what the city attorney did. Finally, hold hearings on why people appeal. That's what you should be doing. And you will learn from those hearings why people, and you will have less appeals without having to raise the appeal fee. Please consider that. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Buss?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioners, I don't have prepared comments. I just have a few points I want to discuss. I live here in Oregon City, here just on behalf of myself. And I've been looking at this proposed fee schedule the last few days, and the more I look at it, the more concerns I have about it. And I want to raise some of those. First, I agree with Mr. Nacita about the Oregon City Municipal Code 1750-170. For my initial review of that, it looks like this decision about fees is a legislative decision setting policy, which according to that section has to go before Planning Commission for a hearing and then come to the City Commission, which I think would be good from a practical standpoint too, to take a step back, slow down, let there be more public process. There's a lot in this proposed fee schedule. So along the same lines, I would also ask for continuance so you can consider whether to send this to planning before it comes back to you, and then there'll be more citizen comment possibilities. But I wanted to talk about these statewide land use planning goals. So as you know, there's 19. Denise, I'm surprised you didn't jump in.
I should have said 19.
She did.
I said 19.
All right. The very first one is citizen involvement. And I know Oregon City cares about its citizen involvement, but it's all for nothing if that involvement isn't backed up by the ability to appeal. You can give all the citizen comments you want, but if you don't have the ability to easily participate by taking an appeal to the next level of decision maker, it's basically useless. So I think these fees, a lot of them are very high, essentially constituting a pay-to-play scheme where we're not supporting citizen involvement. In my day-to-day practice as an attorney, I'm familiar with lots of filing fees in our county and state court systems. That, of course, is largely funded by the statewide budget set every few years. The filing fee for the average case is $165 in Oregon State Court. A declaratory judgment action case is about $255. An adoption case, about $400. LUBA appeal, about $400. Court of Appeals, about $400. It costs folks in those venues way more than the appeal fee to actually process the appeals. But we're talking about public involvement, public access to the courts, and I think that same argument should apply here. I took a look at Lake Oswego. I know I only have a few seconds here. Lake Oswego, for their planning appeal fees, have 50% of the application fee, capping it out at just over $5,000 max. And that's Lake Oswego. So I'd suggest you ask staff at the very least to go back, do a comparison of some other metro area cities, and kind of see where these proposed fees would fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Public comment before we move on? All right. So where's the commission at on this?
Well, I think we had some requests for continuance, but, and I would be happy to make a motion, but when everybody else finished, when we have, if other commissioners want to comment, I would also like to make a comment to the public that's in the audience, because I'm a little bit disturbed right now about what I've been hearing.
I don't mind commenting first if you want.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I feel that, we'll consider the continuance in a moment, but I feel like government is a service organization to its people. But we don't really have a product, we're a service organization. And these are three costs over the cost of 10 years, so they're infrequent. And I thought frequency should be a consideration, which I said at the last meeting. I do not want to discourage citizen involvement, and I think it's critical. Mr. LaSalle made a point that we're already paying for staff salaries, which is a reasonable thing to say. We did not receive any comparison figures from adjoining cities, and I think that's something we should look at. And if theirs are so low, then why are ours so high? And so I think that's a critical piece of information that we should review. I struggle with something Mr. Nacita said, that if you get billed for something, if I'm in the contracting business as a cost plus and you send me a bill and I don't know what you did for those hours, I would have trouble with that. So that probably needs to be resolved or else removed. I don't think it was a deliberate or malicious or ineptitude effect, but the effect is there regardless of what we say. So I think there's a lot to consider, and we focused on this one fee, but others have brought up the fees in total. Maybe I would have no objection to going through the process as described, starting with planning commission and coming to us. So that's my comment on it.
Commissioner Smith, you got any?
We did get comparisons, but
Minimal.
yeah. And it does explain a little bit, but clearly it's, what we're proposing is not anywhere close to any of the other cities. And so I guess the comment of how we determine a fee other than the one proposed is that we just have a gut feeling about it, and I'm not sure that that's enough. And because that's clearly what we will be end up doing right now, and you know, some of us are you know, kind of have been brainstorming that, but I think there needs to be a better way to come about that fee, these fees, other than just what we're comfortable with compared to other cities. And if that takes more of a dialogue, I'm open to that. But we also had comments in the record from Commissioner Rachel Smith, Lyle Smith as well, that we've read, and she was doing just that, you know, coming up with an estimate or an idea that was kind of comparable with other cities, but I'm not sure that we got much of a rationalization of how she came up with that figure either, but.
Commissioner McGriff?
Yeah, I did some of the same things. So I just want to say to the people who are at home watching this and the people in the audience, you immediately condemned the commission that we were going to just rubber stamp this. And I assure you that is not going to happen. We asked staff to come up with some ideas, and they did exactly what we asked them to do. We didn't say do this or do that. We just said come up with some numbers and then we would discuss it. So I want to assure people that we are going to discuss it. For those of you that know me, I have been a member of this Oregon City CIC. I have chaired the statewide Citizen Involvement Advisory Committee through the Department of Land Conservation and Development Commission, and I have a long history of citizen participation. I personally and professionally in no way want to discourage people from participating in the process. But as you know, participation in the process does not mean that we always get our way. It means we have the opportunity to participate. And I frankly don't want to do anything that would discourage people from participating. So we are going to just talk about it. So please do not immediately assume that we're just gonna do this, because that's the feeling that I heard. And don't condemn the staff either. They're giving us their best professional judgment by saying, this is what it really costs. Now, maybe that's what they feel it really costs based on their staff time, based on attorney time and all that, but that doesn't mean that that is what we are going to do. So please give us the opportunity to work on your behalf, to look at this and talk about it and come up with something that is reasonable, that works for the community, and that's all I ask.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Roy, is there any time sensitiveness to this?
Only to portions of it, yes. To the appeal portion, I mean, the commission could choose to amend the fee or not amend the fee or pull that separate. There are other portions of this which adopt fees for processes which will be effective August 2nd. And so there was a delay on the effectiveness to also be August 2nd. So the second that we get new types of appeal fees for, say, 3 and 4 plexes, we had a fee to go with that, a new process. But you certainly can pull out any fees that you like.
Dan, what are the fees that would be applicable for the second? Can she answer that question?
You can ask any question you want.
They're throughout. I mean, if you have specific fees that you're concerned in, it may be easier to pull out.
Here's the deal. We either got to do this all at once, or we're going to have to put it off. And the sense I'm getting from the commission right now is that you guys and us need to have a further conversation about how this works.
I agree with that. And the expression tonight was that there was no one fee, there was a multitude of fees. So I think the whole thing needs to be reviewed.
I was not here at the work session, and I have not had an opportunity to watch it, but either way, it's pretty clear that this is just about half-baked so far. And that's no insult on you or staff, just the fact that, there's a lot of changes right here, and we really haven't had a really good opportunity to look at it. I would consider a motion to continue to.
Can the commission provide a bit more guidance as to what you would like to, for us to provide you? We do have the fee explanation that talks about the hours and the explanations for each of these. And then we also have the comparison with 10 other jurisdictions. I heard Lake Oswego, I can add that as an 11th comparison as well to this.
Was Happy Valley in that list?
Yes,
I
Happy
think
Valley's
so.
on the chart.
Happy Valleys, yeah.
Beaverton, Clackamas County, Happy Valley, Hillsborough, Milwaukee, Salem, Sherwood, Tiger, Tualatin, and Wilsonville.
All right. Well, and each jurisdiction has their own set of thinking about what they're doing with their fees and how that works. But it's clear to me right now that the city commission is not willing to just say yes or no on any of these fees, and to try to break them out on the stuff that you need to have on the second versus the stuff that we can talk about some more is really complicated and unwieldy. So I think we should just, what happens if you don't have this fee schedule in place by August 2nd?
There's no authority to charge a fee.
Then it's free.
Well, hold on. Don't we currently have fees in place?
Not for the new stuff.
Not for everything, no.
Oh, okay.
That's why I said, what are the fees that are going to need to be applied on August the 2nd? And if you could just pull those out, we could take a look at that. I mean, I'm not saying it's tonight, but we could take a look at it quickly.
Well, so if the stuff that you're planning on starting to charge for on August 2nd, you're not charging for now, is that right?
We don't have it.
It's a mixture of clarifying existing fees, charging new fees for services we already provide, and charging fees and clarifying what the fee is for new processes as well.
Yeah, I think we just need to move this off to the second meeting in August, and you guys can clarify what those particular fees, what the new fees are, what the clarifications are, justifications for the fees that you're talking about, whether it's HRB or Planning Commission, and then, bring us back something that looks a little bit more reasonable than what this is, if you catch my drift.
Do we have an opportunity to maybe have even a 45-minute to 30-minute work session
With planning, or with that?
to just talk about
No.
kind of where we're at on that? Because I made up a lot of markups on mine about what I thought they should be based
Well-
on what I saw on the chart.
I think that that bringing it back to the second meeting in August and having, setting aside an hour and we hash this through.
I'm on board for that. I do want to back up something you said, Commissioner McGriff. This social media commentary, and some of those comments were inflammatory and misleading. And some of the people that made them know they were misleading because they were at that meeting and they know what was said. So if you're going to summarize a meeting, please do it accurately. We did not say we were going to approve those fees. We said it was a subject of discussion. And if you did that, then I'll pull a Rocky Smith and I'll say, shame on you.
So is there a motion? Commissioner Lozano?
The other thing is, I noticed in Mr. Paul Espy's comments, who works for Lake Oswego, he emphasized communication in advance of things, and that was why they seem to have less motions of these types. So communication is always key. So having made that minimum speech, I'd just like to make a motion that we set this over to a date certain, and you want to say the second?
February 7th, 21st, I believe.
August.
August 21st.
So we do,
I'll second it.
would
But
there
only for-
be, is there a concern about not going on August 7th?
Huh?
The first meeting of August?
Can we have the
Are
necessary?
you guys going to be able to get the information back to us before then?
What information would you like? Would you like us to, so what I've heard is add Lake Oswego.
It's already on the chart.
I don't think we had Lake Oswego on there.
Yeah,
I think that was
I
gonna be the
thought I saw
11th.
Lake Oswego on here because there was something about Lake Oswego charging X, Y, or Z.
We do not.
Maybe it was a comment.
Do we have substantiation of any hours that we intend to charge based on our history on
We
an
do.
item by item thing?
Yeah, we have that line by line.
All right.
Well, I guess my concern is, we've been given most of the information that staff knows to bring us. So how do we not get into just discussing a random number?
Well,
based on how we feel. That's what we have to bridge the gap.
I guess the key for me in the planning commission appeal is that I need a breakdown of what, attorney time versus staff time and how those interact to get us to that $10,477 or whatever it is. Because I think, some of these comments are right, that, we're already paying staff to do this work. So why should we bill an appellant for staff time? Now, I get the attorneys because Bill's a contract guy, so, he bills us for the hours that he uses. But I'd like to see that breakdown both for the planning commission and the HRB appeal.
That's included in the packet as
So
well.
just a couple clarifications real quick. So I hear a lot about the Historic Review Board and the Planning Commission appeal fee. And that was a discussion at the work session the other night as well. A reference to other fees. Does the commission have specific, could we bring back on the 7th the ones that we need that are going into effect on August 2nd?
That's what I suggested.
And maybe these other ones, I know that the 2 appeal fees, if there are others, the only 2 I've heard about are the appeal fees. I've heard a reference to these other fees. I think they're all justified. They're processes that exist. I'm just trying to figure out if there's something that we can get in place to at least, for the new processes that we put in for internal conversions that are all gonna go into effect, we're hoping to have those application fees in place. Second issue is, I'm trying to draw up top of my head, in the 2-year budget, the planning development fees that come in are 15% of the planning department's budget. So, over 2 years, I think it's a little over 500,000. So when we say it's already paid for, it's not. If we don't have planning fees that are equivalent to the hours worked, we would either backfill that with general fund money, or we would not have those services available.
No,
So,
and I was only talking about the appeal fees for HRB and
okay,
planning.
not all of them.
No.
Okay.
And
Commissioner Smith?
So those are the two. I guess some of the public has referenced issues with
Other
concerns with other things. We didn't hear what those are. So if we could allow people that have, let us know if they have specific issues on other of these topics, then we could maybe make a decision on what we could, because the two that we're talking about are the ones that I have the most concern with. But there might be others out there that we aren't seeing yet. If we could ask the public
Right.
to tell us what those are, maybe.
That seemed to be the vast majority of our conversation the other day was about the appeal fees.
So is there an appetite to pass this without the HRB and Planning Commission appeals?
No, my appetite is for communication is a two-way street. If we're gonna give the public a chance to communicate their concerns, that needs to happen between now and the next meeting. So the gentlemen that raised those concerns need to review what they are and express them to staff, and then we can look at them.
So how about we get what we can for the first meeting in August?
Okay.
And if we're not ready, we will let you know in that staff report, or if you're not comfortable, once we start that process, we continue again.
Well, I know that we don't want to have another meeting, but I would be willing to have at least a work session for an hour on the 31st to talk about some of this, because and I'm going to own this, I'm the one that suggested that we needed to change the fee for the Historic Review Board. I didn't suggest that we change it to $6,460, but that is the actual, that's what staff presented us as an actual fee. I said, I think that it should be comparable to what the other cities are doing. I made a suggestion for $250, and I gave my reason why I felt that there should be more of an appeal fee than $50. And if you want to know that, I can talk to you better. You can listen to the tape, but I'll tell you about it later. So I am willing to have an extra meeting, but on the 7th, if we can come back, staff can come back with the specific new process, like you said, 3 and 4 plexes, or I don't know, Bill, can we not accept applications on that on August the 2nd? I mean, could we say, no, we're not accepting them because we don't have any, I don't see a big rush to get those applications are coming in. I don't see that.
You have an ordinance that is in effect that allows that process. I'd have to think about how to,
We can't just, people can't just come in and not charge something. I mean, they
Yeah.
can't get a free
you know, and
thing.
I may have spoke a little too hastily about, no authority, depending on how the fee schedule currently reads. But we'd have to think about something and see how that works. But ideally, for the new things, it'd be better to have the fee in place when the
You gave us a
ordinance
red
comes.
line version that is the stuff that shows the new things, right? As I recall.
we do.
Yeah.
We do have some applicants that are waiting on August 2nd, that they've been waiting for the code amendments. So for example, the manufactured home park, to adjust manufactured home parks. We have a couple of applications that are just waiting for the calendar to flip to August 2nd. So I would expect
To do new
some
ones or modifications?
Modifications. But there's no fee specifically for that.
Okay, so you have a couple that are waiting for August 2nd.
I do.
And what's the wild guess of what that dollar number is?
I couldn't tell you
Is
in
it-
an educated way.
Is it $50,000? Is it $5,000? $100,000?
Looking at the red line, where is that fee?
Over the whole year, we're at 250, so it's much lower.
Okay, so again, if we miss a couple because we don't get it done on August 2nd, it's not going to be the end of the world budgetarily, as long as we get it done within a few weeks. So I would still say, let's continue this to August 7th. Do you want to make the motion, Commissioner?
I would so move.
Second.
Call a roll.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
All right. Okay, so we removed the one issue. Does anybody else have anything issue with the consent agenda?
No,
No.
I would so move.
Move to, well, make it then.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded, call the roll.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Well, first of all, was that with,
The item completely
We already
removed
pulled
from
off.
the agenda.
Pulled and sent it back to staff.
okay, just making sure.
Yes.
Yes, I heard.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. Okay, we're on communications. Mr. Manager?
Thank you. We'll start with an update from Mr. Phil Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Manager and Commission. At the May and June Commission meetings, we discussed the Buena Vista Clubhouse and options for moving forward with reopening the house and what that would mean for the city implications. And so this is just an update to those conversations. Since that time, we have reconnected the electricity to the structure. So we've installed a new 200 amp panel, new baseboard heating and exterior lighting, as we discussed previously. We've also been working very closely with the Friends of the Buena Vista Clubhouse to identify a shared vision and scope of work to be completed. During our previous meetings, we had a conversation to bring back findings by the end of July. We're anticipating just this week, we received the Island Architects scope and cost estimations, and we are using that as a base point to move forward with a second opinion from another firm, which will take about 3 weeks. So we're anticipating that we will come back to the commission at the August 21st meeting. That'll allow us time to provide the staff report and appropriate background materials for the commission to consider. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
So you're going to use one quote as a standardized basis for all the quotes, so they can be compared easily?
Exactly. So it'll be apples to apples. We work very closely with Mr. Island to make sure that we're on the same page with what the scope of work is and what those deliverables will be. With that base cost estimate, we will use his numbers for linear feet, any of the quantities that would be required for a second opinion to make sure that they are a true apples to apples consideration.
Well, my understanding was when we gave direction back in those meetings that we were to have those figures in our hands by the end of July. Not that we had a plan on a standardized concept on how to get them. So in my mind, we're late on the deliverable.
And I would say that we set regular meetings with the Friends group. We were developing the shared scope of work, working with volunteers. Sometimes timing doesn't always work out the way that we would like to, but we are moving forward as quickly as we can with all the information that we have available to us.
So we will have all this information consolidated and ready for decision on what date?
So August 21st, so we need to provide staff reports a week in advance of the commission meetings. We're anticipating that we'll have a report back from the second opinion engineering estimates within the next 2 to 3 weeks. But based on our staff report requirements, we need to buffer in a week for public postings. So we should have, in theory, within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Nope, everything is happening as he said it.
All right.
It's been very productive and very collaborative.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
And I will just say, in addition to Commissioner O'Donnell, that we don't give deadlines very often. And that's a month late.
That's what I say.
Mr. Manager?
It is what it is.
I know.
Next, we have an update from Chief Band.
Very quick building update. If you look, there's a lot going on out at the site. This is a riveting picture of, if you go to OregonCityPolice.com and at the top on the far right, it says live feed, you can click on that link and this will be an update, constantly updated. I can't remember how often, it was every few minutes or something. It takes a picture and after we've got kind of a collection of pictures, you'll be able to see sort of over time what's going on. What you can see on the left is the north wing. What they're doing right now is they started on the north wing. They're abating the lead paint and asbestos. And in this case, there was a bunch of mold. The school had to vacate that. So they're abating and then moving to the middle, and then the people who are doing the demo are going in behind them. That north wing is already down. They were kind of separating all the materials. And so the demolition of the middle will begin in July 25th, and then the abatement begins on the south, July 30th. They asked specifically, we were out at the site a day or two ago, and people have asked about bricks. We thought specifically that the center building is what the public would like bricks from. That's the oldest part of the building. And so we're gonna have somewhere, which once we figure that out, stacks of bricks where people can come and grab some of that, take that with them as a memento of the
Can I
property.
suggest that we don't have somebody come over and take all of them to use for their new patio? That there be
Yeah.
somehow be regulated, so.
Yeah, we're gonna hold some back too, just for people who aren't aware, but other than that, we'll be having weekly meetings. Mayor Holliday's gonna be attending those, and that's all I have.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I had asked the consultants during the open house, what was the process for salvage of materials? And when you take a track hoe and whack it into the side of a building, they don't end up in very good pieces. They end up in a million little pieces. So what are we doing and what is our plan for keeping the majority of that building out of the landfill
So they have a.
in Arlington?
Sure. So they have a plan, and I will get that, and I can just email it to you. But if you saw what they've had down, they are going through, they do knock it down, but then they pull apart. Wood goes to a specific place. They literally regrind the concrete that's in there, take that to a place, windows. They've got a plan to reuse everything that they can.
So they're actually taking the windows out, they're not track hoeing them and smashing them to pieces?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Manager.
I think I have one more question.
Commissioner Smith, sorry.
It's probably good that I'm gonna be on vacation when it comes down. But I just want to, I just hope when I get back, that the archway has been taken down and is protected and is still in existence, so that's all.
That's all we have for tonight.
Saul? Thank you. You have anything, Commissioner Rosenbaum?
No, sir.
Commissioner Smith?
No.
Commissioner Mick? Sorry,
You're losing your voice, you're losing your voice, it's all right.
You got anything for us?
Oh, you mean, was that all from Tony? Because I wanted to ask about, did any staff go to the meeting this afternoon at 4 o'clock regarding the permit with the Grand Ron?
I did, yes.
So what's going on?
It was a general update by Department of Environmental Quality on the potential purchaser agreement process. A general, what is it? What is intended to do? What the process looks like. There was a presentation from Confederate Tribes of the Grand Ron members. They answered questions from those in attendance, and then offered a public testimony component towards the end of the meeting. So it's really, I think, pretty preliminary. The public comment period was open, I believe, until July 31st to accept written comments at this point on the proposed PPA.
Are they, here's my question, and this is what I've heard through the community, is that they're asking to not have to do some of the requirements for something else in return.
Right.
So I'm assuming that everybody in the chain of title with regard to environmental contamination is supposed to pony up and help pay for that. So it's not just on them.
That's what the prospective purchaser agreement with DEQ will lay out, is who's paying for what. And obviously, the Grand Ron doesn't want to, in fact, this process takes anywhere from 9 to 12 months. It's not a fast process. But the point is that whoever buys it doesn't want to be buying into $5 million of environmental remediation. And so
they didn't do.
Right. So this is the process whereby they answer those questions.
Well, I think that there's going to be responsibility for the new property owner.
Sure.
But what this does is limit their unknown liability.
Right.
Okay.
For
That's what I
as
was-
you're implementing the approved agreement, if you come across something else, And this is how you start to address those
Okay, well,
unknown
that
liabilities.
is what I assumed, but I thought I better ask the question.
And I think we're waiting for another draft of the draft to come out. I imagine it's going to change from the one that was posted.
I went online and I've already started reading the thing, and it's very laborious, but necessary. But yes, I do have a little announcement.
Okay.
So I wanted to just announce that the Friends of the Buena Vista Clubhouse are having a cleanup on Saturday at 9 o'clock, and the Parks Department is supplying us with a dumpster. And so if you want to come and watch or supervise, you can come see me raking pine cones or cleaning stuff up or chopping things up and putting them into the dumpster.
Is the Parks Department donating the use of the
We're doing the work, and they're gonna bring the container for us to put the yard debris in. So you'll know where I will be on Saturday morning.
Okay.
I want to return to the Grand Ron thing. My understanding in reading the one letter is that there's something of value that the Grand Ron tribes would contribute in exchange for some kind of relief from these cleanup fees. Is that not part of the solution?
I'll have to get back to you. I don't.
All right. With that, we're adjourned.